All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. So happy to have you today for this event. This is Left Bank Books Presents Indie Bookstore Day / National Poetry Month celebration, combining these two for a fantastic evening, featuring poets Allison Funk, Sai Hoa, Jason Summer, and Marjorie Stelmach. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Allison, Cy, Jason, and Marjorie, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore, especially on such a day as today. Today we officially reopened to the public, and it was so fantastic to see so many incredible faces visit us today. We had a line outside the door almost all day. In fact, I think it was all day. So really just fantastic to see so many people. You can come back in to browse, and we are excited to have everyone back. We are still offering curbside pickup as well, and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world even. We are happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. We hope that you enjoy this event, this celebration of poetry, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a signed copy for you or for your friends at left-bank.com. Purchasing a signed copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating, and it allows us to keep this event series going. So thank you for your support. We need your support, and especially today, you are supporting local talent as well. I am Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event, so you can type those questions as a comment at any point in time throughout the event. And be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. And now I'm going to welcome all of our poets, and then I will introduce them each before they read. So we will have, we will go in alphabetical order. And I'm super excited to welcome everyone back. If you could please help me at home in welcoming them with either the emoji for the applause, or you can applaud like out loud at home and we can try to hear you. It'll be great. But here we have Allison Funk, Sai Hoa, Jason Summer, and Marjorie Stelmach for Left Bank Books. Hello. Everyone's coming on screen. Hi, everyone. We have a great crowd here this evening. Very excited to hear your poetry. So we are going to start with Allison. So I'm going to take Jason, Sai, Marjorie out, and we will get to your moment in the spotlight in just a moment. So we will see you soon. All right. Hello, Allison.
Hi, Shane.
Hold back up your bio. Allison Funk is the author of 5 previous books of poems, including Wonder Rooms from Free Verse Editions of Parlor Press, the recipient of a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Samuel French Morse Poetry Prize, and the Society of Midland Authors Poetry Prize. She is a professor emerita at Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville. And Allison, I will turn this over to you for your moment in the spotlight. Very excited to hear your reading.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Shane.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Shane, for all your hard work in pulling this together, and to Left Bank Books, and such an exciting day that the bookstore is reopening, and today is that day. I'm going to be reading from The Visible Woman, which is my new book of poems. And I'm going to start by doing something that I haven't done before. One time I attended a writer's reading, and she incorporated objects that she used sort of as props into her reading. And I'm going to try that tonight by showing you The Visible Woman that I titled my book after. And this feels a little bit like show and tell, the kind most of us did in elementary school, but maybe that's appropriate given that the object that I'm going to show you was given to me when I was 10, and she's a little, oh, there we go. Okay. This is pretty weird. This is just the shell. It's a plastic shell. And it came in a box with lots of parts, with organs, with bones. And the idea, this was an anatomical model set that was given to me by my parents when I was about 10, presumably as a way to teach me about the body that I would be growing into shortly. And I'm going to read the title poem in which this figure, I'll be referring to this figure, but I'll also be referring to another visible woman. So this visible woman, circa 1960, 30 years later, the National Library of Medicine created another visible woman as part of their Visible Human project, in which, for the woman, a donor gave her body upon death to the institute, and then this is kind of weird, but then they sliced her into some 5,000 paper-thin slices and then digitized those and created a 3D model that they call the Visible Woman. So I have two visible women who are in the first poem that I'm going to be read, which is the title poem. And just a minute. The Visible Woman. She's virtual as well as visible on a screen that lets me enter through the gate of her ribs and fly so fast into her heart, I'm almost convinced it's pumping. Who knew inside I'd find symmetries vivid as mandalas monks create to erase? Mine, too, is a story of how we disappear. Yet I keep returning to the visible woman, the digital version scientists made from flesh cross-sectioned, a feat unthinkable in the 1960s when my visible woman arrived in a kit of little plastic organs and bones. Thinking I was done with dolls, my parents meant for me to recognize myself in this model as I grew. Even encouraged me to open the box of extra parts labeled optional, the miracle of creation. But faced with the enlarged breastplate, pregnant uterus, and thumb-sized fetus, along with sheets of directions, skeletal, respiratory, nervous, endocrine, I quit, boxed up her vitals, and buried her at the back of my closet. Forgotten, she lay hidden for years until by accident I found her and my way on the web to her counterpart, where I discovered a woman's lungs bloom a deep rose. The heart is stained a shade lighter, close to the blush of Mary's gown in a Fra Angelico painting of the Annunciation, the one the girl forsakes to become a woman clothed with the sun, queen of heaven and earth, lady of sorrows, mother most pure, mother of perpetual help, the mystical body. Icon, simulacrum, or the anonymous phantom who was once a real woman from Maryland. I'm thinking again of how we're swept away, and I want to go back to when I was 10, to start all over with the bones, the brain, the heart in two parts I'm trying to glue together. The next poem is sort of from that same period. I may be several years older. It's called A History of My Skin. And this poem is sort of a snapshot of my life as a white teenager living in the suburbs during the civil rights movement of the 1960s. A History of My Skin. Just when I thought I'd finished reading it, I discovered a chapter I'd missed. Similar perhaps to finding one ancient text under another on the untanned skins of calves scribes reused. rubbing them with pumice or lemon juice until the original nearly disappeared. Still damp from a shower, I noticed below my waist, between my left hip and navel, a little asymmetrical brown spot that told me sun once shone there long enough to leave its mark. Wondering when that part of me was last exposed, I doubled back to the 60s and a bikinied teen far from the cities that burned. Harlem, Newark, Watts, Detroit. Those summers I was tanning. By winter, my skin blank as a baby's again, I'd thought, no harm done, as if anything could be erased. Ignorance, my blindness. Look, I think since. Find what else you're hiding from. The next poem is going to take me back to the 19th century. It's here somewhere. It's called In Daguerreotypes. And it was written really as a response to my discovering that in the 19th century, when cameras were used that had such long exposure times, up to 20 seconds, and so you couldn't move at all. And when they were photographing children, that was nearly impossible to keep a child, especially a baby or a toddler, still for that long. So generally, the mothers would hold the baby or small child, but the idea was that the mothers were unseen. They were hidden, and they hid themselves and were assisted by the photographers under veils and shawls and other things. And they're very peculiar, these photographs. Additionally, I refer in the poem to the photographer, which in this case is a woman, and of the time too, with these big view cameras. You probably have seen images, going back to the Civil War, images of photographers who would cover their own heads, would hood themselves, or cover themselves and part of the camera also with a black cloth. So in this poem, all the women are hidden. In daguerreotypes. It surprised me to find women pretending they weren't there. But like her male counterpart in the 19th century, a lady photographer must have been used to camouflaging mothers in portraits of their children. She'd even assist in shrouding them. So a seated mother hidden under a blanket could keep a child on her lap from moving for as long as light took to darken a camera's plate. Still, I wonder what the photographer thought when she disappeared beneath her own black cloth, acting as if she couldn't hear the minor key mothers hummed under their stifling folds, didn't notice their air of lavender and curdled milk. Later in the dark room, when erasing a peekaboo finger, the trace of a shoulder or wrist, wouldn't she have been haunted by her sisters in the art of now you see me, now you don't? As I am, from frame to frame, their effaced and misshapen forms, all I see. The next poem is called Murmurations. And probably a lot of you are familiar with the word murmuration, but if you're not, it's a word that describes a flock of starlings. And flocks of starlings are sort of famous for creating these amazing figures as they move together in the air. One of the reasons they move together is to help one another avoid predators. Murmurations. Moving as one body, the way girls in matching suits and caps practice figures in a pool. Holding hands, kicking in unison to create a flower or 8-pointed star. Flocks of starlings synchronize in the air, clouds of them morphing as they veer and dip and weave, wing swimming, though not for sport, rather to escape a threatening falcon or hawk. Don't underestimate them, as some do, beautiful women. In seconds, they can change direction, swarm, become a mass that renders a predator helpless. I'm going to move to the final section of the book and just read 2 more poems. In the last section of my book, all the poems are self-portraits of a sort. And I'm going to read one that's titled Portrait Missing a Self. On a bad day, I feel the ache of having been, as if I've become a phantom limb. Then it starts, serrated wave after wave, everything dangerous, bladed. The keen edge of a stare, a pill bottle's rim, my plane about to go down behind enemy lines or into a wilderness in which, ready, set, even the arrows of trees are taking their aim. Until I remember the sea star in extremis, which regrows an arm, and the writer nearly done for, creating a likeness to embody herself. And the last poem is the last poem in the book. It's titled Late Sketch. It is a sort of a self-portrait. It is also really came out of my enormous admiration for the artist Louise Bourgeois. And there are other poems in the book too that are influenced by Bourgeois, French-American sculptor and printer who lived almost to 100 years old. This is a response to an extraordinary piece of hers in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art. And it consists of about 14 panels which surround an observer in the room. It's overwhelming, and it's called To Infinity. Late Sketch. It's how I dream my squeeze box will stop. That relentless accordion of lungs slowing down to a few notes, the tail end of a coda, and the swirling mind burning out like the last pinwheeling sparks of fireworks or sex. That pulse so like a nagging friend I've known since adolescence and finally outgrown. Now, awake as I've ever been, I see us all moving on, our own dark energy forever traveling between the spiraling galaxies, far-flung streamers of gas, starburst after starburst, tidal tails sweeping past nebulae that resemble our own double helix. So even after, we won't be far from who we were, though released from the roller coaster we'd been strapped to. Shoot the chute, loop the loop. We'll be weightless, off the track and out of time, fugitive, free-falling, streaking through oblivion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. Just incredible poems.
Thank you so much.
All right, so next up is going to be Sai. Hello, Sai.
Hi.
All right, so Sai Hoa is Yapatuka Comanche and Southern Arapaho. His poetry has appeared in publications such as Shenandoah, Indiana Review, Melee, the Florida Review, and the Florida Review. He is also the author of Velroy and the Midis. Oh, I didn't have. Thank you. The Medici Mafia, out from West End Press in 2009. And he formerly lived outside of St. Louis and now lives in Arkansas. We're happy to have you back in the St. Louis area.
Well, thank you for having me, Shane. And I want to thank you and Left Bank Books for having me here for such a great experience, not only for celebrating National Poetry Month, but just poetry in general. I really appreciate it. So thank you. Yeah, I am Yaptip Comanche. Meaning basically I'm an enrolled member of the Comanche Nation, which is located in Oklahoma, outside of Lawton, Oklahoma. That's in the southwestern part. I will be reading tonight some poems from a new collection. It's entitled Ancestral Demon of a Grieving Bride. My work is basically I come off of a rich oral tradition of Comanche stories, Comanche lore that I've heard through my younger years, and carry on that tradition of storytelling. Also, my work reflects some Southern influences. So, and also when I was a child, I really loved weird tales and ghost stories and the works of Edgar Allan Poe. And so a lot of that is, I guess, throw all that in the pot and let it homogenize. And that's where I pull some of my craft from. The first poem I'm going to begin with is entitled Biography. This is more valuable as my talisman than my biography. As a child, Father told me I hatched out of a pearl partly dissolved in wine. And Mother always reminded me that I reminded her of Father, and I made the milk curdle in the stomach of newborns. A high ceiling was our family's dining table, where light was easily swallowed. Father had a low-wage body and pushed around a coffin full of Kahlua and Coke. And daily Mother read my father's obituary aloud in a tone between poetry and a backward prayer. Our first winter living in town, my brother became touched as he sipped accumulated frost off of a mausoleum. I remember the weave of sunlight etched across his face. And me, my whole life, I'm determined to read the devil's mind, to reach in, pull out the brain, open to a random page, and read about my future from the bottom to top. This next poem we're going to read, it's entitled, it's about a geographical location in southwestern Oklahoma, part of the Wichita Mountains. It's the name of the mountain is Mount Scott. Today it's more or less a state park where you can go, and at the base of it you can camp and picnic, and at the top you can drive up and view the whole landscape of southwestern Oklahoma. And so but also Mount Scott also has a historical significance to the Comanche people. Toward Mount Scott. It is sharp as a knife. The bad roads lead to lost roads. The lost roads lead to the same empty place. People sometimes go to lonely places for power. Eagles sometimes are choked. Dragonflies lassoed. The smaller birds follow ghosts to eat off the bugs. A line of barbed wire marks the boundary between this world and the next. Let's see. I'll read this next poem. There's no title to it. Noted to be the definitive bright morning of 10,000 calendars. The church bell melted. Rage of an unrequited love became a terrible serpent. The morning star lowered like an enemy's flag. A vampire's mattress tumbled out at the outskirts of town. Ancient lanterns suddenly thrown through the air somewhere deep in the mountains. And that night, in a snowy rural area, an elderly powdered-faced woman appeared on doorsteps in search of wine. Her origins neatly wrapped in the cold dressing of a snowflake's breath. Let's see. This next poem, totally the beginning, got the idea from Charles Simic. He's one of my favorite poets. I'll just go into it. There, of course, again, no title to the poem. It's been 145 years, and I'm still surrendering to Fort Sill. The Comanche went one way, the Kiowa another, the Cheyenne even another way. We're all cutting off fingertips, leaving trails of direction. The moon is the body and the funeral. Thistle is tall enough to be silent. And we're all being chased to this genocidal beauty once or twice, surrendering to a fast food table with free Wi-Fi, the stench of the run on our beaded kicks. And we're unable to tell the difference between the glow of smart maps and campfires of all who are closing in with their ATM cards and 4G in hand. Even the dead land surveyor from Subiaco is right. There is no sanctuary in the subdivisions we edge closer to where their bowstrings cut. Let me take a sip here. This next poem is entitled Greasy Voice. I smell like the roads cutting through the peanut fields. My dance steps sound like the emptiness of barns. The janitor of hell sweeps up the coffin nails and bouquets of dead horseflies after me. I am a dazed underworld hero, fleshed and rubbed down with my own tongue and brains. The grease of me bubbling like an enchanted lake. I don't even have ashes of dead saints to rub into my eyes. A mud clown face with laughter and grease spraying out, following the hairy tail of a balding star. I carry the power lines of hell around my neck, and my only wing hangs on an empty table. On an empty wall, sorry. Next poem I'm going to read to you, it's entitled Hinterlands. My ancestors were not diligent, and so they lived beside the fort. That's neither on the maps of heaven nor of hell. In these lands, there is no difference between a star and thrown car keys. Chicken nuggets hatch from the eggs of eagles. And I grow dirty while bathing in bottled water. My bed comforter is a wet parking lot I wrap myself up in. If I eat in the morning, there's nothing left in the evening. My dish of grass, cigarette butts is topped with expired coupons. And stir all I like. I never swallow it down. And all the while, my rabbit foot runs about from Las Cruces to West Memphis, searching for that flawless luck. The more one cries, the more one prospers. Oh, ancestral demon, may my lamentations become verbal sorcery. Let's see. I'm going to read two more poems. This next one is entitled In the Month of Cleaning Family Plots. In the month of cleaning family plots, I learned football among graves. And all summer, fanes were plentiful. I fed only on fruit and acorns next to a nest built in a discarded doll's head that marked the 50-yard line. From snakes licking my ears, the sounds of trees and whispers from the dead, I learned how to read plays by how the opposing team huddled. On the field, I gave the appearance of lightning, a wardrobe of open wounds, a magical goon who knew a love that outlasted bottles of tequila and all the Cure albums. It too was true. Let's see, let me find this another poem. Okay. This next poem is entitled Longing Trail. That day my guardian angel was cast out. She responded, "Fine. Your heaven is too bougie and your hell too plain." And then she packed up her one washcloth, one bath towel, and my best button-up shirt. And ever since, we tried every doorknob and followed every mouse trail to get out of the promised land. We've been living out of the potholes of back roads. Along a logging trail, a crow attacked my washcloth. It looked like an owl when it got wet. And the towel wore down to a warm breath on my skin. When I dried off, it melted away in the last rain. And my button-up shirt, it's been so long, I think it was a product of my imagination. But I can finally hear the trumpets in the east the others talk about. And sunlight never catches up to us. We can board with the shadows and not on the pine needles gathered on the steeple. And it's neck to neck, shadow versus light, black hat versus white hat, number 6 versus number 7, snake versus dove, oil versus water, fork versus spoon. And we are even back to trying doorknobs. And at midnight, you hear us knocking 3 times. Thank you.
Thank you, Sai. Since you are not able to stick around for the audience Q&A, I wanted to ask you a question so that
Sure.
We get to hear a little bit from you. So tonight is a celebration of National Poetry Month, and I like to ask poets especially because sometimes it is hard for poets to celebrate National Poetry Month by reading a lot of poetry or writing a lot of poetry because you're doing so many events in celebration of National Poetry Month. So I'm wondering if how you personally get to celebrate National Poetry Month.
Well, I buy a 5th bottle of Jack Daniels and I get no, I'm just kidding. I celebrate Poetry Month. It's great. It's, busy, but it's so detrimental and such a good payoff to go and participate in online readings, virtual, and even like going to see online readings. So I try to catch those a lot. And I've been catching, several of them throughout the U.S. virtually, which it would. At first I thought, reading virtual, going to a reading virtually, I don't know, but it's been actually good because like I said, I don't have to, I can listen to poets from New York or in Maine or in LA or Washington State, up in Portland. And so it's been good. So I try to, in celebration of this month, I've been trying to catch a lot of poetry and hear the voices out there. There's a lot.
Fantastic. Well, I know that you have to run away to do another virtual event.
Yes.
So I want to thank you for being here from Left Bank Books, and hopefully we will see you again really soon.
Well, thank you for having me. Y'all have a good night.
Thanks. You too. All right. So next up we have Jason. Jason, go. Hello, Jason. Jason Summer is the author of. Ooh, is that causing feedback for? All right. I'm going to take you back out, Jason, and hopefully that will stop my feedback. Okay. All right. I will do the bio and then welcome Jason to the production. Jason Summer is the author of 5 books of poetry, including The Laughter of Adam and Eve, and 3 in the Phoenix series, Portulans, Other People's Troubles, and A Man Who Sleeps in My Office. He has also published English versions of Irish language poems and 2 collaborative book-length translations of contemporary Chinese fiction. His poems have appeared in publications such as The New Republic, Plowshares, Chicago Review, Agni, River Styx, and Tri-Quarterly, among others. And now I am happy to welcome back Jason on the screen.
Here I am. Thank you, Shane, and thanks to Left Bank Books. We really celebrate the re-arrival of Left Bank Books during Poetry Month. It's an indispensable institution in St. Louis. I'm going to read just from my new book, Portulans. I've set it up on the shelves behind me too. I don't think you can see them. I learned that from the NewsHour, from the PBS NewsHour. Portulans is maybe an unfamiliar word, but it's an old map, a very early sea chart, and the book has various journeys in it. The first poem I'll read is sort of a symbolic journey in a way, though it shadows. It has a narrative kind of about a 19th century, perhaps early 20th century explorer. There's a dive involved, and he's forced to come up prematurely because there's an earthquake. All that sounds more exciting, perhaps, than is rendered here. The poem's called the Expedition. The Expedition. Beyond the failure to return at all, or having managed bare survival, addled past reliable report, always the chance you would have come up empty, back to the surface and from afar, with nothingness to show. Never in your lifetime to know that what you'd done had been of use to you or anyone. Nothing transformed, but moments that made hours, years. Your record for persistence, evidence to doubt your skill. And yet that final route you took would seem the selfsame one once traveled by the greatest of the journeyers, whose names at least remain to us, signed in their own hands, manifest and log, claims made on their behalf, the truth of certain ancient maps borne out. Your sketches over photographs sought to recover only outlines, but make inspired sense to those who read phrenology on ocean floors, who see in shadowed dents and mounds within the clean geometry of precincts, tomb and temple and palace, a perimeter of habitation, houses vanished, even their middens carried off on the tiny motions of the sand. The trove sites emptied long before the land's descent and sea's rise. Other raiders leaving precious laden, not having to ration time by air or flee that temblor that brought you up so quickly when whatever might have been went down towards center earth. The one shapely stone in your clutch the whole way back, so like a figurine, with suspect crosshatch scratching also, was never artifactual enough. too long turned in the lathe of the sea to trust. Still, your account alone inclined so many to belief that you must be allowed as having had a sighting, albeit as it must be unconfirmed. Do another sort of journey. The book has a mix of poems that are free verse and poems that are formal. I still have the inclination to write in measure sometimes. This is called The Most I Took Back from a Dream. It's about a dream. And what I took back from it, sees the dream as a sort of training ground, in a way. I think that's all. Oh, the dream takes place. The dream takes place wherever it took place. I mean, in bed. But it is a dream of the Burren, a very unusual landscape in Ireland, with the cliffs of Moher are there, for those of you who know Ireland, and it itself is limestone formations. It's dreamlike even in reality. The most I took back from a dream. The ghost sensation in the limb that's gone are by report the ordinary ones, though free variations come when we shed entire bodies in the sleeping bed. We seldom feel as we have never done. So when I tumbled from a nightmare roof, I woke before arriving at a truth not known, though losing what seemed consciousness before I struck the ground felt more or less familiar as the sudden downward route, which ended in an interregnum awake in bed before I fell again into a sleep. By morning I had flown, swooping over a landscape of pocked stone in County Clare, first kited by the wind, sweeping me helpless from the Burren to Moher and out to sea. I soon began to go where I inclined, downward after downcast eyes, but also looking upward, I would rise. How could I disbelieve it? I was there, aloft, approving Moher's precipice and Burren Rock for visionary practice, as if this were the place I would awaken, armed only with that skill which must be taken from dreams. The spirit steered me bodiless. So the premise is when you're sleeping, you're really practicing for when your soul rises somewhere. You can write me if you have that borne out in any way. Next poem's a journey through universes. It's called Multiverse, and no pun intended, but I will take it. It's about the theory of it arises from the theory of the multiverse, which one of these, I'll read one of the epigraphs that happened before it. It's essentially every time we make a decision or make a move, any sort of thing that we do, the alternative that we could have taken also comes into being. I haven't explained that very well. Perhaps this will. This is a quote from Olaf Stapledon's Star Maker. It's a science fiction book. In one inconceivably complex cosmos, whenever a creature was faced with several possible courses of action, it took them all, thereby creating many distinct temporal dimensions. Since there were very many creatures and the combinations of all their courses were innumerable, an infinity of distinct universes exfoliated from every moment. Multiverse. One of her walked right up to the door, but turned and stayed home, which of course engendered the other one's going out. A version of the stay at home for no particular reason held her breath, causing another identical other to come into being who kept to regular autonomic functions. The latter, seated now on a couch that is a reproduction in the first place, listens to the radio, which made for many listeners tuning to an array of stations in all instances of universe that had Marconi or the like. Among songs without number played repeatedly, a single by the Beatles, yes, with a medial D, the Fab Five, and Iridium Seller, Pete Best's drumming drives, entitled In the Church of Baudelaire. And in some cosmic arrondissement, in some dimension neighboring and neighboring that again and again at diversified removes, my very first beloved and I are still together in so many of our forms. That no potential future is allowed to die except in the most local way, that one small life that one is living, is an article of faith among a portion of the smart set, smartest on this earth as well as 100 billion others branching onward. A starry brilliancy of cosmologists, astrophysicists, and provisionally godless metaphysicians can believe, with Stephen Hawking, in space-time continua where he requires no wheelchair, breathes on his own, speaks and sings, along with those, as must be conceded, where things are worse for him than here. And though it may not matter quantumly, although it may, he has been willing to consider in all probability a life of being just hair less excellent at math and playing a passable game of tennis. Individually and in aggregate, in wave and particle, it may be the case reality indulges in an endless and continuous reproduction of souls, loosely termed, or persons, in profusions equal to the number of alternative outcomes to every action in the cosmos. All of us creators, then, of more of us, by stutter or by step. Even down among the cells, impossible to tell who the original is and when. Worlds bred and breed at every juncture. Replicas and duplicates, you in your venues, me in mine. We sense ourselves to be like no one else has ever been. But the ramified are others of us who feel exactly as we do in their existence, if they exist, not a bit less solitary, nor is the sorrow any greater for being multiplied out to infinity, all of which remains unverifiable as the multiverse itself, though deja vu may hint at something, muffled voices coming through the wall. This is hardly a journey poem. I'll read on. I'm interested in narrative, as you're hearing. All of my poems are narrative poems. Just a couple more, I guess. This is called Incident at the Mother's. It would have been the last thing his mother said to him and M, that miserable visit early in their marriage. The final cutting thing on their way out to the car, standing before it. After a weekend of the usual swipes, some subtle belittlement or other to share between them, though more at M than him, he thinks. But truly he forgets what it was that had him lunging at his mother, too quick for him to be amazed at himself even. But he did, his arms around her, back and back of the head, the way you'd catch someone who was falling over. Except he was felling her, swinging her into a waltzer's dip and an abrupt halt, a hovering tableau over the front of the car. He thought he meant to say, just shut the hell up. Enough, shut up. But as he finished, his grip easing, became a cradling. What came out of him as he laid her gently down on the hood was something from the beginning of him, of her and him. Shah, 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 hush. Shah, 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 hush. I'm glad to be able to rove the country in my electronic form, but it's hard to know how the poems are coming across when you can't feel the audience in a room with you. And it's the only time one is in the room with the audience, right? This will be the last poem I read. I think that's about right. It's called Children Wearing My Shoes. And it's, I don't think there's anything you have to know about it, except that kids will do this. Lock up your shoes if you object. And it's in the realm of mortal reminders, Children wearing my shoes. My children have put on my shoes, the pair of them. Male and female we made them, and boots with laces trailing. The shoes mates, The boy and girl not, often contenders, all together now in this. First, the single pair divided between them without dispute, one shoe off, one shoe on, feet lost in them, leg in up to the shin. At the limp and drag pass in front of my chair, I put my book down, but they turn away before I can speak, kicking the footwear into the corner and gone back to the closet and back again in motley, mad shod, a singleton on each foot, the separated twins of his sneaker and slipper, her mismatch of sandals. They crisscross the room, quickening the shuffle to slam the heels on the floorboards, not looking at me, not answering to their names, intent on the performance only, looking past even each other, a flash of the whites of eyes rolling, mouths open, the spooked horse look, and a few cries of half-stifled laughter, but the fourth wall kept intact, as they discard onto the little mound in the corner and race out to return with two pairs undivided on each, old loafers on her, but he's gone formal, processional glide of the long sedans of gleaming black brogues, brougham hearses. I am here, I want to tell them, still here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. Oh, getting that feedback again. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what's causing the feedback, but thank you so much, Jason. And I want to remind the audience that we will have a little bit of time. We might go a little bit long tonight, but we will have time for audience Q&A. So if you want to type up those in the comments, we will get to that. We'll have a little brief discussion with the poets after the next reading from Marjorie. Marjorie Stelmach is the author of 5 previous volumes of poems: Falter, Night Drawings, which was awarded the Marianne Moore Prize, A History of Disappearance, Bent Upon Light, and Without Angels. A selection of her poems received the first Missouri Biennial Award. Her work has recently appeared in Boulevard, Cincinnati Review, Florida Review, Gettysburg Review, Image, New Letters, Poet Lore, One, Relief, and Tampa Review. And now I would like to welcome our final poet for this fantastic evening of celebrating poetry, Marjorie Stelmach. Hello.
Hi, Shane, and
Hi.
thank you for putting this together. It's a pleasure to read for Left Bank Books. Thank you to Allison, Cy, and Jason for giving me the whole previous 45 minutes of wonderful poetry. I'm going to be reading from my latest book, Walking the Mist. It's divided into 4 sections. I'm going to read from the first and last sections. The first section is a narrative of a grieving young woman on a trip to Ireland, the same territory as one of Jason's poems covered. This poem comes from quite late in her stay. It's called The Field of What Could Be. Halfway up the trail to another hilltop shrine, she pauses and turns again toward the sea. Flat gray, its stone coast pocked with pools like a waffle sogged in butter and left to congeal on a breakfast plate old as the world. Above her, a virgin contemplates sorrow, it said in the guidebook. Or was it peril? She hopes this landscape of rubble will prove a prospect worth the exertion. But Lord, it's a long hike, and the tall, spiky, rock-colored flowers that border the trail are glad to cut flesh. Below her, she makes out a clutch of thatched roofs tucked into fields of what could be cows. She looks again. Sheep? At last, a bit of stone wall to rest on, and yes, they're sheep. Of course, they're sheep. This is Ireland. Their bleats are inaudible, swallowed up as they slide down the scale of reduction toward lesser, more featureless creatures. Homily lambs as bland as counters on the steep road to sleep. Irish sheep, wind-throttled, silenced, unmoving, unmoved. Or wait, are they stones? Stones, she sees it now, obvious. homely as roadwork strewn over a field of what could be anything. No fences here, nothing tended. Her lush, industrious Midwestern fields have not prepared her for this sterile enterprise. She looks away, hills in deepening shadow, the sea, and beyond it, her life, featureless, weathered as a wound carved in the side of one more savior. She shivers. She's only halfway there. She'll need to hurry to reach the shrine and return before dark. Above her, a virgin thins in the wind. The remaining 3 poems are longer, that's why there are only 3, and they're all from the final section. Each of them has an epigraph from Fernando Pessoa, specifically from his great poem, The Keeper of Sheep. The voice in these is both that of the shepherd and my own. The first one is keeping. But I remain sad like a sunset as our imagining shows it, when a chill falls at the side of the valley and you feel night has come in like a butterfly through a window. Fernando Pessoa. Of birds, I can't claim to know much. But today, when a small bird drops from inside the sky to snag on a tree's bird trunk, how can my eye not follow its bright, abrupt arc, not clamp on that soft clot of heartbeat and feather? I will it to hold for the seal of language, that I might catch up with its plummet, skid to its halt, and say, nuthatch, birch. It's the only way I know in this world, after the fact. Lurching, lunging, wielding my net of belatedness. Yes, like the keeper of sheep, I aspire simply to watch what passes. Instead, I seize on what pauses, caress what abides my caresses, work on the wording. There's so little time, everything passing. I too am passing. This is the sadness. It's why I listen for bells descending from higher slopes. Someone I think must be keeping a watch on the long progression of the dead. My own come to me across time as if it were nothing, glistening like tears. They come across space like butterfly wings, brushing the tips of the grasses, but I must keep faith with the living too, who are also the dying. So far, I'm a terrible keeper of sheep. My lambs wander serenely off toward the bluffs, dropping over the edge of my shameful unknowing and into the sudden sky, where they'll catch and cling as they can to whatever will hold as they wait out my always belated coming. A roughened patch of vertical trunk or an outcrop of rock just below the cliff edge. There's purchase enough in this world, I believe this. The problem is time. Do you hear it too? Across the world, a butterfly's wing has just stilled after shattering everything. The next poem is called Hold Fast, a term that is explained in the poem, the epigraph from Pessoa. But my sadness is calm and is what there should be in the soul when it's thinking it exists and the hands are picking flowers without noticing which. Words are like sheep. They bleat incessantly, lag and bolt, lose their way. Some days I'm tempted to quit. Most days I keep at it. Today at my desk, though, I'm staring off, watching leaves break from the honey locusts to scatter over the grasses, and mulling the artful mechanics of autumn. Abscission cells massed at the hold-fast point, nudging a leaf bit by bit from the stem until all that's left to the leaf is thirst and the fall. Hold fast, named for its failure to hold. How many bits of the world have we named for the ways they will fail us? Still lifes, utopias, frost flowers, mortals. Lately, I'm drawn to the wordless. Like now, I'm counting my heartbeats. Or rather, I'm listening hard for the instant when one beat is over and the next must rise out of nothing, clenched to go on. I count on my heartbeats, though they too are named for the way they will fail me. Tonight is the equinox. Out in my yard, either it's summer or summer is over. What would it mean to catch earth between beats? To feel for an instant that terrible doubt? I suspect my final heartbeat will find me here at my desk, about to give up. Or else I'll be thinking about my soul, how it just might exist, letting my words pass almost unnoticed as my hand records them, trying to say what I mean. I mean to be faithful. This last poem is entitled Metaphysics, and in it I'm talking to my heart. And I quote a number of people who have talked about the way our task in the world in some form is to round off the rough places into spheres. And you'll see that reappear several times in the poem. The epigraph: to think is uncomfortable, like walking in the rain, when the wind is rising and it looks like raining more. There is ample metaphysics in not thinking at all. Fernando Pessoa. My heart announces she's given up caring about the future. These days she's all about the past, claims ignorance is bliss. Not so long ago, I tell her, scholars thought the heart was a fire, burning blood. She's unimpressed. Another item in the list of ways we got it wrong. We get it wrong about each other all the time, heart and I. Most often, by evening, we've reconciled. Tonight, I read to her from Ptolemy's nostalgic theory of gravity. All earthly things aspiring to the virtue of the sphere, the circle's purity. This resonates with her. Best not to mention an article I read the other day concerning skulls. Our cranium's been rounding now for 1,500 years. Something, I guess, in the DNA constructing helmets for our journey into space when Earth's a barren ruin. Scrawny humans floating out to pollinate the stars. Or is God having second thoughts, reworking old motifs? Halos were a pretty piece of thinking, as were crystal spheres. Myself, I'm fond of skull-shaped skulls, the poignant way mine seeks each night its customary socket in my pillow, letting the one on my desk take up the watch, memento mori. No need, I think, to change the status quo. Heart seems especially quiet tonight. She's like that when she's sad. Or has she drifted off? Tonight's rain soothes me, makes me think of Leonardo's lifelong love of currents, rains and streams and waterways. His was an elegant mind. He wrote that water in all its forms yearned to round the globe, caress Earth's broken edges toward a perfect sphere. Soon, heart will have her way with me. I'll sink into her rocking tides and dream I'm wandering the past, wearing the softened robes of love, regret, or simple gratitude, childhood's clothes. And like a child, I'll wake in tears. Monks used to pray for the gift of tears, a more practical prayer than it may seem, if it turns out humanity's secret task is to round the imperfect globe of the eye. But prayer has never been my gift. Instead, I feel a non-specific longing for alignment with a purpose longer than my life. Something to be faithful to when everything else is over. Once we discussed such things, my heart and I. But who am I fooling? I call it my heart, that pulse of time I feel inside me. Call it mine, but I know it's simply passing through. I know it means to fail me. Thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. So I know we've gone a little bit over time, but we do still have the audience here. So I want to ask each poet the same question that I asked Sai, and I want to answer it as well myself, because the one thing that I've been doing this National Poetry Month, different from other poetry months, is virtual events. So that's been really fantastic to add to what I generally do for Poetry Month, which is read poetry and celebrate and discover new poets. But this year, I've especially not just been discovering new poets and reading things that my friends have shared on Facebook and other places, but I've been going back to some of my favorite poets that have influenced me from early in my career. So I'm wondering, what do you do, Marjorie, to celebrate National Poetry Month? And then I'll welcome Allison and Jason back to get their answer as well.
I have to echo Sai and say that I've been traveling the country, tuning in on friends who are poets and are doing National Poetry Month readings, and it's a great pleasure. And I'm going to miss the era of remote readings. I don't get to travel the country otherwise. But the other thing that happens to me during National Poetry Month, probably because I taught high school for 30 years, is I get their beautiful poster in the mail, and I get to open it and think of hanging it on the bulletin board that no longer exists. And I think of all the poets I had the pleasure of teaching. And the other gift there is that a number of those poets take the excuse of National Poetry Month to email and say, thank you, you introduced me to some poets I love, or now I'm writing poetry myself, or something that I think is music to a teacher's ears. So that's how I celebrate it.
For some reason, it causes feedback when I'm on screen. But let's go ahead and get Jason and Allison's answers, and I will remove myself and let you all have the screen for me.
I'm afraid I don't celebrate very much. I read the poetry that I read all the time, or I'm always looking to be reminded of the terrific poets that have escorted me through my life. And I guess this National Poetry Month, I've had the good fortune to be reading friends' books. Took the opportunity to catch up, and I've enjoyed the reading tonight. This is my celebration. Otherwise, I didn't have a cake or anything. Listen.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't know that I have any kind of rituals or on a regular basis do anything for National Poetry Month, but I just want to say that this has been fabulous tonight, and to be introduced to Sai's poems, because I hadn't known his work and known him. But I just want to say, for me, to be reading with Jason and Marjorie is really, really wonderful. Both of you, both of them, speaking to the other audience, have been a part of my life and really important influences and readers of my poetry. Listen, going back to 1991 or so, and Marjorie, not as with Jason, but a long time. And I'm so grateful for both of your new books, and also for the ways in which you continuously help me to become a better writer by taking the time to look at my work and to give me good ideas about how I can improve. And it's sort of a real celebration to be doing this tonight with the two of you, old friends. Thank you.
Gosh,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. I'm going to, oh, maybe I can do it. Okay. Well, before we get feedback from me, I want to thank all of you for doing this event tonight with us, for reading, for the audience for coming tonight. Really just incredible comments from the audience, both on Facebook and on YouTube. Reminder that the books are available for sale from Left Bank Books. You can go on, buy a copy of any of the poets' books from the evening. And I want to personally just thank everyone for helping us celebrate an incredible independent bookstore day. It's a big day to celebrate if you are an independent bookstore, and we did a big celebration today. So thank you all so much for being here, for participating virtually, in person, however you helped us celebrate. Really big thank you from Left Bank Books.
Thank you,
You're
Shane.
welcome.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.
Mhm.
Well, have a great evening, and we will see you again really soon.
Bye-bye.